It's hot in here. All right, let's go back to what I was doing before, and I think I left off with margin trading, and I have some more terms, and I'm going to talk about New York and the NASDAQ and the electronic. Then I want to finish up talking about mutual funds. So kind of a broad range of things here for term. We won't have any shortage of terms they ask you for on your final for on your midterm. As you can see, there's a lot of terms here. So next couple of terms. One is something that's called a market order. And there's a variety of variations of this, but the broad thing is to call it a limit order. So it's two types of orders that you can, there's even more than that, but this is the two broadest categories. A market order says to buy or sell now at the best possible price. So I call my broker and I say, sell my 100 shares of GE. He says, is that a market order? And I say, yes. And he says, okay. He takes it to the market. He does not pack his suitcase and go, but I mean, it goes to the market. And it happens right now at the best price that broker can get me. So market order. Do it now and get me the best possible price. In contrast to that, we have what's called a limit order. And here you decide to place a limit on the price. To buy or sell. So I have 100 shares of GE, and I call my broker and say, sell my 100 shares of GE, but get me a price at least $55 a share. Or get me $52 a share. Or maybe even at least $48 a share. So there's a limit. There's some kind of a limit before there's some kind of condition needs to be met. Sometimes we call these conditional orders, limit orders or conditional orders. So I place some kind of a condition on the whole thing. And it can be on the buy or sell. So I could call and say, buy me 100 shares of GE, but don't pay any more than $45 a share. I've set a limit on it. Okay, so I can do that. So, or once again, the market order, do it now. I just buy it. Whatever you get from me, I'm happy with. So, or set some kind of limit. Now that's important, these two kinds of orders, because the market order is going to be executed right now. The limit order can stay around for a while. And there's always someone out there with these limit orders wanting to buy at a certain price. And that comes into play a little bit later on when we start talking about something called an auction. Because these people are essentially placing bids into an auction. They're placing bids into an auction. So kind of store that away. The last one that I want to talk about is something called a short sale. Before I put a definition down there, come straight ahead and let me talk about it. How do you make money on the stock market? Stock buying 101 says, buy low, sell high. So right now, GE selling at $50 a share. And next week or next month, because I'm so smart, I've got it figured out that GE is going to be selling at $40 a share. It's 50 today, 40 in a month. How do I make money? Buy low, sell high. What price would I like to buy it at? I'd like to buy it at 40. What price would I like to sell it at? 50. But wait a minute. It's 50 before it's 40. Well, stock market people are nothing if creative. And they figured out a way that you could sell it today at 50 and buy it next month at 40. And I've just described a short sell. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? All right, let's give you a definition and I'll come back and see how it works. First of all, it's a sale, so it's not a buy. This is only referred to the selling side of the thing. Sell stock that was borrowed from the broker. Well, I should say sell stock today that was borrowed from the broker. You believe that the price will decrease. Now, if the price does decrease, how do you make money? You buy it when the price is low, and you give it back to the broker that you borrowed it from. You so-called close out the short sale. So you close out your short sale at a later date. If you're lucky, the price has gone down, and you make money. What's the bad sign? You sell it short today, and instead of the price going down, the price goes up. Give you an example. My worst nightmare. What if I sold Berkshire Hathaway at $40 a share in 1964? And I never closed it out. And today it's selling at $120,000 a share. And I finally want to close it out. How much have I lost on the deal? A whole bucket. Because I sold it at 40 and I bought it at 120,000. So that's your worst nightmare. Now that would never happen that badly because the broker would have closed you out long before that because you'd have lost everything gazillion times over. They've only let you go bankrupt once. They won't let you go bankrupt multiple times on one deal. So when you finally went bankrupt, they'd have closed you out. But that's the worst case scenario. Ideally, you figure out a company is going to go bankrupt. And you sell it short today. So you sell it today at $10 or $20 a share. In a month or two from now, it goes bankrupt. And when it goes bankrupt, you can buy it back at $0. And so you make whatever you sold it for. So that's a pretty good deal. And there are people who make their living selling short. They're called short sellers. They're very active in the marketplace. There's always people out there trying to do that. They're predicting that certain things are going to happen that'll drive the price down. And there's always short sellers out there. So sometimes there's more than others. When the market's going down, 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 all of a sudden everybody's a short seller. When the market's going up, 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 nobody wants to sell short, or very few people. But if you really think about it, when should you sell short? When the market's doing this or when the market's doing that? Well, it's doing this because what goes up comes down. You want to sell it when it's high, you buy it when it's low. So what goes up will come down. Very hard to do that. So short sale, short sale. Very common. This is not something that you should try and do, incidentally. Short sellers should only be pros, not amateurs like you and me. You have a question?
If the share goes like down, if you have bought like 10 shares, then when it goes down, you buy 100 shares and you make up the difference because it is again going to go up.
Oh, your question is, can you double down on your bet and go long on the stock once it's gone down and the answer is yes, but what if it keeps going down to bankruptcy? So, each one is a different transaction, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You have to treat each one of them differently. Short sale. Okay. So, now I want to talk about the different markets. The first market I want to talk about is the New York Stock Exchange. I won't highlight this first couple of things in here, but just to give you some idea. It started in 1792 You don't have to memorize that, but I'll just give you some idea how old it was. So it's 220 years old, roughly. And it was established at the start of the U.S. Republic. 1792, for those of you who know your American history, is the beginning of the U.S. Republic. And what it did is it sold the bonds of the U.S. government at that time. So it was originally called the New York Bond Exchange, where the bonds of the U.S. government were bought and sold. In the middle 1800s, it was called the New York Stock and Bond Exchange. And then for the last 150 years or so, it's been known as the New York Stock Exchange. So it's kind of gone through a little bit of change of purpose, and from being a bond exchange to a stock exchange is primarily what it is. It's located on Wall Street. That's why Wall Street is so famous, because that's where Wall Street's only like 3 blocks long. I don't remember exactly. 4 blocks? 3 or 4 blocks long? 3 or 4 blocks long, because you can stand on one end and see the other end. It's just something that's right there. And one of the main buildings on it is the New York Stock Exchange. And it's at one end of Wall Street, and the other end, basically it's brokerage firms, and the U.S. Treasury has a big building across the street from the New York Stock Exchange. So, now, the point is, there's a physical location. That was why I was going through that. Okay, so New York Stock Exchange, 220 years old. It also has a nickname as the Big Board. Don't worry about that, but that's if you talk about the Big Board, you're talking about the New York Stock Exchange. Now, a couple of key things about the New York Stock Exchange. I want you to know what's meant by a two-way auction market. It's an auction market. I want you to be able to explain a two-way auction market. Most people that are watching this class have done some transactions on eBay. So somebody takes something out there for sale, they put a time limit on it, and they start getting bids. And who ends up buying whatever you've got out there for sale? The answer is whoever is willing to pay the highest price, whoever gives me the highest bid on it. So I take my exam out there and I try and sell it out there so somebody can buy my. No, I wouldn't do that, but something of value, and I put it for sale, and I start accepting bids on it, and whoever gives me the highest bid. Now that's an auction, right? So I have something for sale, and I sell it to the highest bidder. That's a one-way auction. What would be meant by a two-way auction? Two-way auction. The other way it could be is, what if I wanted to buy something? Neil McCarthy decides he wants to buy something. And whatever it is say I want to buy a car. And let's say there are 10 car dealers here in the Flint area that carry the car that I want to buy. Which car dealer am I going to buy my car from? The answer is, I'll visit all 10 dealers if I'm smart, and I'll buy my car if I'm financially motivated. It might be some other things, but if I'm financially motivated, I'll buy my car from whoever offers it to me at the lowest price. So all right, two-way auction. Sellers sell to the highest bidder. Is that right? That's eBay. Buyers buy from, who would I buy my car from? The lowest seller. Buyers buy from lowest seller. Sellers sell to the highest buyer. Buyers buy from the lowest seller. We have that two-way auction. So we always have people, a whole bunch of people want to buy, and a whole bunch of people that want to sell. And we have that continuous two-way auction taking place at all times on the New York Stock Exchange. So that's a fundamental way of doing it. New York Stock Exchange, think eBay. Best way I like to tell you. It's an auction. It's an auction, but it's a two-way auction. Now, the auction itself is run by somebody known as a specialist. We only have specialists when we have a two-way auction market. So essentially, we only have them on the New York Stock Exchange. Now, there's some smaller regional exchanges that do have specialists also. But by and large, specialists refers to the New York Stock Exchange. What they do is they run the auction, run the two-way auction. So they're kind of the auctioneer, if you want. So if somebody wants to buy and somebody wants to sell, they go see the specialist, and the specialist, whether it's a buyer or sell, will think of them as running the auction. Who wants to buy? Somebody comes and says, hey, I got some stock I want to sell, so the auctioneer says, the specialist says, all right, I got this stock for sale, who wants to give me a bid for it? And then somebody else says, oh, I want to buy that. I want to buy some stock. So then the specialist says, all right, somebody wants to buy, who's going to give them the best price to sell it at? So they continuously think of them doing. Now, they physically don't do it that way anymore, but at one time they did. Now the computers do a lot of that work for them, but that's essentially what's happening. They're running a two-way auction. And the second thing about a specialist, they buy when no other buyers and sell when no other sellers. So we got this two-way auction. Well, you go up, you say, I want to buy 100 shares of GE, and there's no one out there that wants to sell GE right now. Where do I buy it from? The specialist. Because he'll take the opposite side of any transaction. Specialists are always willing to take the opposite side of any transaction. And if I want to sell, who's going to buy it from me? Well, if there's nobody else that wants to buy it, the specialist steps in and buys it. So they kind of keep the market working. Think of the specialists as the people that keep that market working. There's always someone there. Remember, we have to have liquidity, and they provide liquidity. They provide the liquidity into the marketplace. So maybe you make yourself a little note. They provide the liquidity. There's always someone willing to buy or sell on the New York Stock Exchange. And that someone, if no one else is there, the someone is the specialist. So they provide a very important function. They run the auctions, and if there's no bidders to buy or sell, they take it. Important people. There's some, I'm not even going to go into all the details of it, but there's ways they make money. Nothing is done for free. But there's ways they make money, and it's not illegal, unethical, or whatever. I mean, there's ways they make money. The NASDAQ market. Well, the New York Stock Exchange was known as NYSE. What does NASDAQ stand for? Answer, stands for NASDAQ. Originally, it stood for the National Association of Security Dealers Automated Quotation. But there's nobody other than Neil McCarthy that could ever remember that. And I don't know how I remember it because it's stuck in my brain. I'd have to have a crib out here, but it stands for that. And so it started in the 1970s. So in the 1970s, we'll show that overhead there quickly. I just wrote down 1970s if you want to know what I wrote down. So in the 1970s, it was known as the National Association of Security Dealers Automated Quotation. But what didn't take long before everybody said NASDAQ stands for NASDAQ. That's good. Ah, you caught my cold. Don't. Now, NASDAQ started in 1970. Note it's roughly 40 years old. It's relatively speaking, the new boy on the place out here. It kind of evolved under a system that was known as the over-the-counter market, which has been around for quite a while. But as a formal market, it's only been around for 40 years. Where is NASDAQ located? Remember I said New York Stock Exchange is on Wall Street? NASDAQ, it's the interconnection of all brokers, I'm going to say in the U.S., although I'm certain there's international ones involved in it now also. but it's the interconnection. And so essentially, this was before the internet, so I don't want to use the word internet when they started because there was no internet, but you can think of it now as the internet. I mean, if that makes more sense to you, type of thing. So NASDAQ essentially is an internet connection of all the brokers in the United States. And so there is, you can say it's everywhere or you can say it's nowhere. There is no central point. You can go and point to their computer, say, oh, there's a computer, there's NASDAQ, but that isn't NASDAQ. It's any place you have a brokerage office in the United States that is connected to all the other brokers, which is there's thousands and thousands of them, that would be the NASDAQ market. It's all these people that are interconnected. So NASDAQ is the interconnection of all brokers in the U.S., so you should know that. No physical location. The key word here is negotiated market. Now, rather than thinking of NASDAQ right now, think of buying a car. How do you buy a car in the United States? You go to a car dealer and you negotiate back and forth to come up with a price. If you don't like that one, you go to another car dealer and you negotiate back and forth and arrive at a price. You don't like that, you go to another one and negotiate back and forth to buy. That's what's meant by negotiate. So it's a one-on-one. One person wants to buy, one person wants to sell, and the two of you negotiate a price. Remember, the other one was an auction. I didn't know who I was going to buy or sell it to because it went up for auction. Here, it's a one-on-one thing, so it's a negotiated market. So anytime either buy or selling, your broker is negotiating with someone else. And who they are negotiating with is a market maker. A market maker is on the NASDAQ, and they own an inventory of a given stock. They own an inventory of a given stock. For example, Microsoft is on NASDAQ market. It turns out that there are 100 different market makers, over 100 different market makers for Microsoft. Each one of those 100 different market makers has an inventory of Microsoft stock. What they do is they quote you two prices. They quote you a bid and an asked price. Now, I have no idea what Microsoft stock is, what the price is. But let me say a bid price of, say, 80 and an ask price of, let me say, 81. I have no idea what the real prices are, but we'll go with that. The bid price is the price that the market maker will buy the stock from you and what do you think that ask price is going to be? Price market maker sells stock to you. So let's say Microsoft has 100 different market makers. Each one puts out a bid and an ask price. Price they're willing to buy it from you, price they're willing to sell it to you. First of all, how does the market maker make money? Buy low, sell high. Always. So willing to buy at 80, willing to sell it at 81, buying low and selling high. So as long as they can keep that spread at a reasonable amount, they can make a lot of money. And what happens is all of these market makers' bid and ask prices are public information. So you call your broker and say, I want to buy 100 shares of Microsoft. They can literally check, so you're going to buy it, so they're going to check the ask prices of all 100 market makers. They'll typically find the lowest one or two, and then if it's a big enough order, they will negotiate with the market maker to get you your best price. Listen to all those words I just said there. How does a transaction take place on NASDAQ? Market makers put out these bid and ask prices. Your broker contacts them all. It's done electronically. It's done in a blink of the eye. And then he'll pick one or two of those and negotiate the best price for you. It's called a negotiated market. New York Stock Exchange, we take it onto the market and it goes to auction. So we have one that's negotiated and one that's an auction. Two different ways of doing it. Now, that's the way transactions took place up until about 6-7 years ago. And somewhere in the early 2000s, it didn't happen overnight, so it worked its way in slowly. We came up with a third type of exchange, and it's called the electronic exchange. And there are several electronic exchanges. There's not just one or two of them. There's several of them around. And they use a computer to match buyer and seller. Now, the computer program that they've got to do this is proprietary, which means they're very careful not to tell us how they work. But since there's no humans involved, it's all done on computers, there's almost no cost of doing this, and the speed of it is whatever the speed of computers is. What do you measure that? Nanoseconds? Computer speeds in nanoseconds, I think, which is really, really tiny fractions of a second. So they're a lot faster and they're a lot cheaper. And essentially what they're doing is they're putting the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ out of business. And we're going to live in a world of electronic exchanges within your lifetime. Now, New York and NASDAQ are both trying to adapt their platforms to be more electronic to compete, but they got a tough pull in front of them. The downside of electronic exchanges, this is Neil's opinion, is any program that's been written by a human can be figured out by another human. And if I know their algorithm, there's some ways of making money, isn't there? So somebody's going to tap into their system and do it. There was another thing, and let me just talk here for a second just to give you an idea of the problems they can have here. Just about a year ago, which would have been April, May of 2011, we had what was called a flash crash. And what happened was, literally within a few minutes, all these computerized exchanges went haywire. And the stock market lost like 20% of its value within a few seconds. And then a few minutes later, it recovered all its value. And it was called, that's what they meant by flash. It happened in a flash. And it was because computers got fouled up somehow. They haven't figured out yet what happened. They got a lot of theories, but they really don't know what happened. But it was really attributed to these electronic exchanges where something screwy went wrong. And we don't know if it was planned or it was just a glitch in the program or what. But it scared the daylights out of a lot of people. Can you imagine? There were some companies, like there was one, I can't remember the name of it, it was selling for like $60 a share, and within like 2 or 3 minutes it went down to pennies per share, and then a couple minutes later it was back up to almost $60 a share. I'm rich, I'm broke, I'm rich. Oh, yeah, I mean, it was, you know. that to me is, somebody did something, I don't know what, but it's a flash crash. So that's the downside of electronic. There's something good about a human in the middle there who recognizes that a $60 share of stock shouldn't go down to pennies in a few seconds unless something else happens. So so there's some advantage of having a human in there. But we're going electronic. We're going to be electronic exchanges. Now, let me tell you, this is from now on, there's a bit of an opinion, but there's also some data that I want you to know. My opinion, up on my soapbox, my opinion. I don't think anybody taking this class should be owning individual shares of stock. If you ask me how many shares of stock I own, the answer is 0. I don't own any shares of stock. Got a lot of money, but I don't own any shares of stock. What I believe in is individuals should buy mutual funds. I don't think you and I are sophisticated enough, are on top of things enough to make investment decisions. And what we've seen is mutual funds have gone from almost nothing 50 years ago to now they own somewhere around 70% of the marketplace. So they've gone from 0 to almost 70% within the last 50 years. And that trend is still not done trending. Never going to get to 100% because there's always some fools that want to own their own stock. But you don't, in my opinion, you don't want to do it. So first of all, what I want to do is I want to define what's meant by a mutual fund, give you the advantages of a mutual fund, and then go through some terminology that separates one mutual fund from another. And then I want to show you a source of data that you can use to investigate mutual funds, so on your own, as to which ones to invest in. And then as part of that, give you some more things that you need to look at. So this is the way I think. Once again, I'm on a soapbox, so take it for what it's worth. But I think this is the way you should invest. Clearly, it's the way I have chosen to invest. First of all, a definition. Mutual fund. Many investors pool their money together. And hire a professional manager. Many investors pool their money together and hire a professional manager to make their investments. Many investors pool their money together and hire a professional manager to make their investments. That's what a mutual fund is. Now, several years ago, I was going through some of this material with an undergraduate class, and hand went up, well, is it possible for our class to all pool our money together and start our own mutual fund? And the answer is yes. They did it, and they kept it together for about 4 or 5 years and even got a couple of professors hooked in on the scheme. So you can do it, but it's called an investment club when you do it. It's not really called a mutual fund, but it's the same general idea. But I normally wouldn't recommend that because you're still too small. So this is what a lot of you get together. We're talking literally tens of thousands of people. Pool their money together. Hire a professional manager. Make their decision. All right, the advantages. This is why I think you should do it. First one, diversification. If you remember week 2, I talked about risk versus rates of return. We had Markowitz, and then we had Sharp. And the whole idea of week 2's lecture was to hopefully impress upon your brains the advantages of diversification. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Have several different investments and so forth. Now, remember that round lot, that 100 shares? And let's say stock is $50 a share. Well, to buy one round lot, that means you've got to invest $5,000. You first get out of college, how many of you have $5,000 to buy one round lot? Well, some of you might, but maybe one. Then you go, all right, you want to be diversified. So you really ought to have 30 or 40 different companies. So you're going to own 100 shares in 30 or 40 different companies, each one of which is going to cost you $5,000. Now, how many people, when they first get out of college, have $150,000 to $200,000 to become a well-diversified portfolio? The answer is, a handful. Mitt Romney, or something like that. Get in politics, I don't want to do that. But you got to be wealthy. You got to be a wealthy person, and most of us are not wealthy people. And so, with a mutual fund, with an investment of $2,000, $3,000. If enough of us pool our money together, we've got that 200,000 or 2 million or 10 million or something like that. And we can become diversified. So we own a small part of a very large diversified pool, but we are diversified. So diversification. Second thing, would I trust you to pick my stocks? Don't take it personally. But I don't trust you folks. And not only I don't trust you, I don't trust me. I want a professional. Expertise. I want a pro doing it. I don't want somebody that took one course in finance from Neil McCarthy out picking my stocks. Just not a good idea. And so I want somebody that's a big-time pro out there, a real pro that knows what they're doing, spends their whole life, lives it, eats it, whatever, and they're making my investment decisions. Now, if enough of us pool our money together, we can create a big enough pile of money that a pro is going to be willing to do it. If you and I go up to the pro and say, here's $5,000, would you invest it for me? They'd look at us like, huh? What am I going to do with $5,000? If you make that $5 million, maybe I can invest it for you. But so we can hire a professional, okay? The third thing, for anyone that's an engineer, low friction. For those of you that are not engineers, low transaction costs. If you want to buy 100 shares of GE, even if you do it online, you've got to pay $5, $6, $7 per transaction. Now that doesn't sound like much, but that's cutting into your margin. If we've got this big pool of money, and instead of buying 100 shares, we're buying 10,000 shares of GE, it still costs about $5 or $6 to do that. But we're spreading that cost over 10,000 shares instead of 100 shares. And thus, a bigger percentage of our money is actually being invested. And that's why I say low friction, because it's sucking money out of it. Or that's what the transaction costs mean. We don't have much in the way of commissions. Commissions are close to zero because we're spreading it over so many shares. Oh, we have chocolate chip cookies. We had a cell phone go off in here. Got to buy for the entire class for the whole year? No. Low friction, okay? Low friction. So, these are the three main advantages. You're diversified, you got a pro, and your costs of doing it are really, really inexpensive. And this is why I believe you should be using mutual funds. Because $2,000 or $3,000 gets you into most mutual funds, and you're on your way. So do it. Now, within mutual funds, there's some terminology. How am I going to get all of this and the 20 questions on the exam? Well, this is going to be tough. But I'll figure out something. I want to slice through all that. Right now, there's somewhere around 8,000 different mutual funds, and they're not all the same. So here's ways we can slice them into different piles. First one is known as an open-end fund. And then we're going to have what's called a closed-end fund. An open-end fund. We got this pool of money where we got all the people have sent us their checks. An open-end fund will accept new investors and new investments. So if it's open-end, you can join it. You can buy into that fund. Or if you're already in it, you can put more money into it. So it's an open-end. A closed-end fund, no new investments, or no new investors, or investments. It's truly closed. Excuse me. So open-end, closed-end. So you just can't. Now, open-end fund, the pot's there. You can throw more money in, take money out, do whatever you want. It's open-end. Closed-end fund. How do you invest in a closed-end fund? Closed-end fund, shares in the closed-end fund are bought and sold on the stock exchanges just like shares of stock. So the only way you can buy into a closed-end fund is to find someone else that wants to sell out of it. And that's what stock exchanges are good at. So it's like shares of stock in a company, but the company is really a closed-end fund. So generally speaking, most of us, the newer ones, invest in open-end funds. But if you want, just like buying shares of stock, you can go to the market and buy shares of stock in a closed-end fund. So there's no one way or the other. But those are different. So closed-end fund, you have to buy them on New York Stock Exchange. Open-end fund, you just send money to the fund itself. The next contrast is a load fund versus a no-load fund. One of these funds, if you do it, you have a chance of passing this course. If you go it the other way, I promise you I'll flunk you in the course. A load fund. You pay a commission to person that sold you the fund. There's all kinds of people that sell mutual funds. Insurance agents, stockbrokers, whatever. And if you invest through an insurance agent or a stockbroker, the old saying in economics, there's no free lunch. They want to get paid for that. And that's called a load. You pay a commission. And the commission can be anywhere from 1% to 5%. Just right off the top. If you pay a 5% load and you invest $1,000, the mutual fund only gets $950. The salesperson gets $50. In contrast to that, a no-load fund, you invest directly in the mutual fund. What does a no-load fund cost you to invest? No load, zero. You put $1,000 in a no-load fund, $1,000 goes into the pot with your name on it. If you invest in a load fund and I find out about it, I'm going to flunk you. Nobody that's ever has a course in finance should invest in a load fund. Where can I get a list of no-load funds? Google it, folks, or whatever you use for your search engine. Put in no-load funds. You'll find there are thousands of them. Literally thousands of no-load funds. Don't go to those load funds. Don't put that salesperson out on a yacht in the Caribbean. Okay? Keep them off the seas. Make them earn their money someplace else. Go no-load. There's been a lot of studies on it. There's no difference in performance. Load versus no load. Other than you'd lose the load. Don't do that. All right. An index fund versus actively managed. Incidentally, highlight all these things. I forgot to do that as I went along there. Closed versus open versus load, no load, index in managed fund, actively index fund in an actively managed fund. An index fund, your money is invested, your money is invested in all stocks in a particular index. For example, I might write down, money is invested in all stocks of a particular index, e.g. S&P 500. Money is invested in all stocks of a particular index. If you buy an S&P 500 index fund, how many different companies have you invested in? So not a trick question. 500. Okay? And you don't need a human being involved. The computer does all the work for you. The computer does the buying and selling, and just it's time to buy, back and forth. The cost of doing this is almost zero. Well, not quite. It's not zero, but it's almost zero. Remember that friction? Really, 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 really low friction. Let me just write down low friction. If that means anything to you. Doesn't cost you much. Actively managed. Someone picks your investments. Do they work for free? Can I write down high friction? Most academic people recommend index funds because the more money you keep invested and the less money you pay for friction, or friction sucks out of the system, the better off you'll be in the long run. Not all, because there have been a small number of managers that have done superior work. And if you get one of those picking your stock for you, I'll go for that superior one than a blind index. But the index is so broad, and S&P 500 is so broad, it's hard to beat the average, which is essentially the average. It's hard for an individual to beat the average since we're all part of that average. So think about that. Load versus investment objectives. And here we have what's called the types of investments made by the mutual fund, made by the fund. I think I put this on last year's exam. And a lot of people said investment objectives is to make a lot of money. That's not what's meant by investment objectives. Investment objective says, what kind of investments are you going to make? Let me give you an example. I've gone to the Wall Street Journal. Bring this in as tightly as you can, and then I'll move it around to highlight what I want. All the way in as tightly as you can. Ah, that's great. So here's what the Wall Street Journal lists as mutual fund objectives. I'm sorry that kind of got chopped off there, but I'm not real good on copying. I'm dangerous. All right, they come up with this list of these would all be different investment objectives. The first one would be emerging markets. What does that mean? If I say I want to invest in a mutual fund whose objective is emerging markets, then all my money in that fund is going to be invested in the parts of the globe where they're growing very, very rapidly. We've got people from China and people from India here. Both would be emerging markets. So your money would be going into companies in China and India and other parts of the world that are doing very, very well very recently. Okay, that would not include Western Europe. It would not include the U.S. and all of that kind of stuff. So emerging markets, the newer growth type markets around the world. Is that place you want your money? Maybe some of it. Maybe you don't want any of it. If you don't want any of your money in emerging markets, don't invest in an emerging market fund. If you want all your money in there, put it all in there. You probably got a higher beta coefficient. Remember those things called beta coefficients? When the market goes up, do you want a high beta or a low beta? High beta. So as long as the market goes well in those countries, with a high beta, you can make an awful lot of money. The recommendation, the usual recommendation, 10, 15, 20% in international/emerging markets. Minimal. Now for those who are high risk, put more of it in. But minimally, you got to have one fund that you put 10, 20% of your investment in emerging markets. Let me just drop down. Whoops, go back to the overhead here. Go back overhead. The next one I want to point out, European region. Funds investing in markets or operations concentrated in the European region, Western Europe essentially. Do you want any money in Western Europe? Do we trust those people in Western Europe? Once again, probably if you're well diversified, you want 10, 20% of it minimally in that kind of thing. So that's a mutual fund. It's telling you, it's their investment objectives to put it in those particular markets. Okay, here's one here, Latin America. How much money do you want in Latin America? Well, unless you're from Latin America, you probably don't want 100% in there. But once again, 5 or 10%, be well diversified, might be a good idea, something of that nature. Let me kind of go back down here. Large cap, core, large cap value. What does those mean? All right, large cap. Large cap means the big companies. Mid cap means the middle-sized company. Small cap means the small companies. Okay, large. So largest third companies, the middle third, or the smallest third. Now, old people like me, probably large cap. Young people like you, small cap. You're willing to take the risk. Which one's got more risk? So make your decision. See, investment objective. Don't tell me investment objectives means to make money. I didn't like that answer. That was one that kind of irritated me. So it's the types of investment that your mutual fund is going to make. Now, these are all, backtrack, these are all stock funds. You can also have bond funds. You can also have funds that invest some in stocks and some in bonds. So once again, these would be major types of investment objectives. So it's the kind of investments you want your mutual fund to be in. Investment objectives. So maybe that's, did I run out of space here? Types of investment, where'd it go? Back it up. There we go. Types of investments paid by fund. Is that what I've described here? So stocks, bonds, emerging markets, Latin America, Western Europe, down the line. You have to figure out what the investment objectives are. Now, what we need, come ahead just for a few seconds here. There are 8,000 mutual funds. And that means when you've got a pile of money, you've got to choose among 8,000 different mutual funds to invest that pile of money. How are you going to figure out from 8,000 which ones to pick? You're going to get a copy of the Wall Street Journal, put it on the wall, get a dart out, and give it a wing? The Wall Street Journal had a contest back about 20 years ago where they hired some pros, or they asked some pros to pick stocks, and then they threw some darts at the Wall Street Journal and they picked stocks, and they figured out who did better. Remember that efficient market hypothesis? If that's true, if the efficient market hypothesis is true, the darts should do just as well as the pros. And they weren't too far behind. It was I would never as a pro match myself against the dart. I mean, you're asking yourself to look like an idiot. But you can do that. Okay, you can do that. But I think there's probably some better ways. My opinion, I'm up on a soapbox again. There's a company called Vanguard. Oh, not Vanguard. There's a company called Morningstar. So let me kind of write this down. I'm not certain where that name came from. Morningstar is a company that, I'm going to say tracks or evaluates mutual funds. And I've been forgetting to do that, but let's highlight that. You got to know what Morningstar is. What they do is they follow, I forget exactly, somewhere close to 2,500 different mutual funds. And for each of those 2,500 mutual funds, they put up one-page report out once a year. Now, each month they update it, so they do about 200 of them a month, so they get to 2,500 in the course of the year. So it takes about a year for them to go through, and they put out 1/12 of that each month. I went to our library and pulled out a page out of Morningstar. So this is what a page, that's good, right like that. This is what a page from Morningstar looks like. Now the one that I picked out, the mutual fund that I chose to track, was a Vanguard 500 index fund. Now Vanguard is a company that has several different mutual funds, and they're all no load. So if you, well, first of all, if you don't know where to look for no load funds, go to Vanguard, because they have 50 or 60 no load funds. Their fund objective is to be an index fund that tracks the S&P 500. Now your generation might not be terribly interested in that, but I was, so that's why I did it, because I did it for my purpose, not for yours. But you can pick out one that you want. Morningstar then puts all kinds of data together here. And I'll go through in particular some parts of this. But there's all this different data that Morningstar puts together. One page on each company. The first thing they put in is a section down here where it's all writing. And here they give you a little bit of the history of the Vanguard 500 Index Fund. They tell you who's running it, more about their objectives, and so forth. So you get some verbiage. So you for those that like words instead of numbers, that's where you get the words. Now there's two things that Morningstar does. And the first thing I want you to do is to come in as tightly as you can on that right there. I'll get that center. Here we go. That's pretty good. As tightly as you can, because I just want that one box. Ah, that's perfect. That's good. Now what they have done is they've looked at a 3-year time period, a 5-year, and a 10-year time period, and they've given them a rating. And it's called a star rating system. And what I want you to do is to know what's meant by a star rating system. So we're going to come back on this. Now this is all 3 stars. But I want to explain to you how this thing works here, okay? But so they do this as for every different fund. Now I don't know why they haven't got the 1-year one in here, but they've got the 3, 5, and 10-year ones, and each of these are 3 star. It's over that period of time. Let me explain to you what that's meant by that. So back it up, and I have to start writing here a little bit. Make it smaller. Make my thumb shrink. Incredible shrinking man. Okay. Star rating system. And this is highlighted. This is imagine that highlight that I put on there. It measures a risk-adjusted rate of return. Let me try to explain that. Supposing you get a 10% return one year, and someone else gets an 8% return. Well, which one has done better? Well, 10% sounds better than 8. But sometime during the year, the 10% one was way up here, and other times during the year, it was way down here, and up here, and down there. You went through a wild ride, but you didn't go up 10%. The 8% one went boom, 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 grew like grass. You sure you want that 10% return? Or would you want that 8% return? Well, you may or may not, but it's risk adjusted. That's what they mean. So it's not just the average return, it's been adjusted for the volatility, for the variability over time. So a risk adjusted rate of return means they've taken the return over the period of time, and they've adjusted it for how volatile or how much variability there is. So risk-adjusted rate of return. And then what it does is it creates all the companies that fall in that category with that investment objective. They create a star rating system. And as Neil draws a normal curve, and that's about as good as I draw them, we have a tail on either end. We have a chunk here, and we have a big thing in the middle. So these are not equal length, they're equal sizes. This is 1 star. This is 2 star. 3 star. 4 star. 5 stars. %10 of the companies will get only 1 star. 10% will get 5 stars. 22.5% will get 2 stars. Excuse me. 22.5% will get 4 stars. And if my math is good, 35% will fall in the 3-star category. This is best, and this is worst. Do you want to invest in 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5-star mutual funds based upon their risk? Well, 1 is just not even considered. 2 is not really considered either. The answer is what you should invest in would be 3, 4, and 5-star mutual funds. And the reason being, history has shown that companies or mutual funds that are 5-star one period tend to gravitate back or regress back to the 3-star over a period of time. But you clearly don't want 1 and 2-star performers because those are duds. Usually when you're that bad, things fall apart on you, bad management or something. But 3, 4, and 5-star. So the first thing you want to do is you want to see how many stars. Now, this particular company, Vanguard, S&P 500 index, had 3 stars. So that's not bad. And that's really kind of in the middle. And it's hard to beat the average over long periods of time. So that's pretty good. So that's one I would consider. The second thing they have, come in tightly as you can again, and then I'll draw this up also, because I want to focus in on that. They call that the current investment style. I'm going to call this a style box. I'm going to call this a style box. And you notice it's a 3x3 grid, and I'll draw it out so you can kind of maybe, well, I don't know, maybe can you see this pretty good? Yeah. You can see this? Okay, well, call this a style box. So in your notes, write down style box. And make it a 3x3 grid, because I want you to be able to duplicate this if I ask for style box on the exam. Along the side here, it says large, mid, small. What does that mean? The largest third of the companies, the middle-sized third companies, and the smallest companies. You people want to be what? In the smalls? Maybe. And I want to be up here someplace, right? And then across the top, let's look at this one, the right extreme. It's called growth. Growth companies, remember last week's discussion. Growth companies had high PE ratios. You should remember that. Companies with high PE ratios, they're growing, very rapidly growing companies. In contrast to high PE ratios, value companies would have very low PE ratios. Value companies have very low PE ratios. they're not growing, they might even be shrinking. The blend means it's got some value and some growth, so it's a mixture. Blend means mixture. Now I should have drawn my own, but because here. In this upper left-hand corner, value companies that are large, they're considered to have the lowest risk. That's what's missing from this box. This right in here, lowest risk or low risk. Where would be the highest risk box? Bottom right-hand corner. Small companies, growth. Where would you fit in this style box, your generation? The ones that want low risk or the ones that want high risk? Well, there's no correct answer for that. No correct answer. But generally speaking, younger people want to be down here. And what about these style boxes in between? In between risk, okay? In between levels of risk. So low risk up here, highest risk down here. And these are kind of bands if you want. These two are about the same, these three are about the same, those two are about the same. So higher or lower and lower risk as we slide up along through here. And it shows you where your mutual fund is. Now, this is an S&P 500 index. 500 of the largest companies. So they're all going to be large cap, right? By definition. Some of them are going to be growth, some are going to be value, which means they're a blend. So it gives you some idea of the style that you have chosen, what level of risk would be associated with it. It's a very important piece of information. I would guess, and I'm guessing, I really haven't looked at the data, if you took emerging markets, small companies, wouldn't you be down in here someplace? That's just a guess. Emerging markets, small companies, great opportunity to make a bundle, great opportunity to lose a bundle. Highest risk, but could be very wealthy. Just remember that. Okay, back off from that now. So this is mutual funds. I've shown you where to get that. Oh, incidentally, where do you find Morningstar? Go to any large library system. You can find them online, but they have limited amounts of information online. To get the full information, it costs something like $10,000 a year or something. And only the largest libraries, well-equipped libraries, incidentally, the Kettering Library is one. So any of you here in Michigan, you can come to our Kettering Library, and we have Morningstar, the big book. It's a big book like Yay, and each page is a different mutual fund. It's available in our library. When you get to the point in your career where you have to start picking mutual funds, go to Morningstar, pick out 5 or 10 different funds, go to the book and look and see what their style is, read about the management of it in there, read about their performance over time, look at their star rating system, get some idea what it's all about. Because that's the way you can go about picking mutual funds. All right, I think I've talked enough here tonight, certainly longer than I wanted to. I think I gave you enough terms to keep you busy for a while. I don't know which 20 I'm going to put on your exam. Did I cover 20?
More than.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more than 20 there. So I will randomly pick 20 of them. I don't know what they are. I'll do that in the next couple of days. But it won't be tomorrow because tomorrow I fly to Florida. My wife's still down in Florida and I got to bring her home this weekend. So the next couple of days I'll do it. And I guess I wish you all well on your exam, your midterm exam. I will grade it fairly quickly and send it back to you as long as the address that you've given the school is a correct address, because I have mailing labels with everybody's address on it. So it'll be sent to whatever address you have given the university. Some of you have got some really weird addresses which probably aren't valid anymore. All right, good luck. I'll see you next week, and I think it's Miller time.